Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card to share with you featuring Newton's Nook designs. I'm up on their blog this week. The September release will be a little bit later in the month, and so we're sharing some extra projects this week, and then next week we will have a customer projects feature. So for today's card, I want to do some ink smooshing. I've done this in the past on my channel, and usually I do the ink smooshing by putting the Distress ink onto my craft sheet or onto an acrylic block. But today I'm going to be using a stamp pocket. Basically what I want is a flexible piece of plastic that will resist the ink and the water will beat up on it, but it will allow me to get a different look with this ink smooshing. When you use an acrylic block, the ink stops at the edge of the block and creates a really harsh line. I was looking for a little bit of a more free-flowing end, where like it wouldn't be a really harsh line where the ink stops. And I can achieve that by using a piece of plastic that is larger than the card. And so that's basically all I'm trying to get at here. Also, by applying the ink to a piece of plastic, something especially clear, and then pushing it to the card, I can get a little bit more control over where the placement is, rather than putting it down onto my mat where I have to turn the card over, or turn the the piece of the card over and tap it in. I might not know exactly where I'm getting the ink, and if I want a little bit more control, this allows that. So the lightest pink color I used was spun sugar, and right now I'm using some worn lipstick. Spun sugar is an incredibly light color of Distress ink, to the point where you could hardly even see it on camera, and it's pretty light in real life as well, and especially because you're adding water to it, and that's creating it to be even lighter. But I found that layering your lightest color first was more effective. I had tried this previously, and I started with the darker color, and by the time I got down to the lightest color, you weren't even noticing it. So I definitely suggest trying the lightest color first. And so I am moving, like I said, from spun sugar as my first color to worn lipstick, and then finally my darkest color is the picked raspberry. I will also be using the picked raspberry as a distress stain to add some more color. You can see here that I pulled a lot of the picked raspberry off because I didn't want it to be overwhelming, as I will be adding it later. You can bend up the stamp pocket or piece of plastic and apply ink to only specific parts of it, which again is kind of an advantage over the acrylic block, which obviously you can't curl that up and just tap parts of it on. So it's just kind of a different way of trying this technique. You probably have all three on hand. I'm sure you have acrylic blocks, your craft sheet, and you have some sort of thin plastic sheet that you could use. Also, I found that I wanted to create a little bit of a splatter look, and so I just, once most of the ink was off of the stamp pocket, I sprayed a little bit more water so that there would only be some small areas where it was dark, and because most of the ink was off and it was only the remnants that were being activated again, and tap that on to create more of those splatter effects. So you definitely can't have too much ink. The more ink you have, the more of a solid impression you're going to get. If you want just flicks, you need a very light amount of ink. And once I had a little watercolor area that I liked, and I was focusing here as the bottom left of my card, and I'll put the sentiment in that white space that's left in the top right, I'm going to start stamping. When I first tried this card out, I stamped first and then smooshed the ink on. But I found that because you have limited control, where you can sort of decide where it's going to end, but because there's water involved and that sort of thing, you're not perfectly in control. This is still kind of a messy technique. I mean, you don't wind up necessarily with a bunch of ink on your hands, but it's not one of those techniques where you're perfectly controlling everything. And so if you want to control such that your flowers end right where your ink ends, it helps to stamp the flowers second. And also this way I got a more of a random effect, whereas I had sort of tended to try to control where things were going when I had the flowers there, and it was driving me nuts. And so now I kind of let the watercolor do its thing and fit things in afterwards, and that I found worked a little bit better for me. And then, you know, if you have that little bit of a controlling impulse like I do, you might agree. But you can do it either way. You could emboss all of this first. I'm stamping it in VersaFine ink and covering it with clear embossing powder. This stamp set is Beautiful Blossoms by Newton's Nook, and it creates these flowers that look like they were quilled, but obviously it's just a stamped image, and I really like that fine detail. I think it also fits in with the sort of tangled look, or the doodling look that's really popular right now. And I also like how detailed you can, how much detail there are to these flowers, and it kind of lets them really be the star of a show on a simple card like this, because there's so much going on with them. You don't need a lot else going on in the card, and they create beautiful backgrounds. As you can see here, I was able to combine larger and smaller flowers to cover an area, and you could cover the entire card too if you wanted, obviously, but I just wanted to make sure that there was still some blank area. So you see, that was my experiment card, and the ink was running a lot more there. I want a more controlled splatter this time. I have some picked raspberry Distress stain, and you can see that my bottle was a little bit messy from the last time I tried this technique, so I'm wiping it off so that I don't get ink everywhere. What I want to do is create a splatter. This means that I'm going to tap my Distress stain onto my project. I'm going to tap it firmly and quickly so that there becomes that splatter out. If you tap it slowly and gently onto the paper, it's going to create more of a circle. Because I want the look of a splat, I'm going to tap it quickly and firmly. And then I'm going to just let all of this dry. I let it air dry because I was trying to let the art do its thing, just like I was with the watercolor. And I think that I really like the way that it turned out in the end. So that's it for this card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, working with Newton's Nook stamps and Distress products, please subscribe to my channel. I'll leave you links to the Newton's Nook blog in the video description below. Thanks for watching. Bye.